Hi everyone. I've got quite an important video today, and I really hope you follow the link in the lower bar if you're at all interested in the Wikileaks situation. This is probably the most important thing to see. What it is it's the House Judiciary Committee that held a meeting, basically to the hearing to talk about the Espionage Act and legal and constitutional issues raised by Wikileaks. Basically they're deciding what they're going to do about it. Okay, it's 3 hours long, but if you're interested in this, this is fascinating and essential viewing. I'm actually going to put onto this video what I find to have been one of the most stirring pieces of it, and it was a speech by Ralph Nader, his opening speech. There's a panel of 7 experts, basically. Lots of interesting conversation. In my mind, those calling for heavy action against WikiLeaks have quite shallow and empty arguments. Some arguments that I myself have already disproved or debunked already on YouTube. So if I can do it, it can't be that complicated. The arguments, on the other hand, coming from those calling for restraint, are based on very robust constitutional arguments and seem to have a far wider reaching understanding of the implications of whatever action will be taken against WikiLeaks, or in terms of looking at what America needs to do to change its secrecy policies. So yeah, please go and watch it if you're at all interested. It is long, but if you can't watch it on one sitting, just bookmark it and watch it wherever you can. But here is one of my favourite bits from it, and it's Ralph Nader talking about WikiLeaks and secrecy. Okay, thanks, bye.
Ralph Nader is well known, a leading advocate, an author, a lawyer, a presidential candidate. But Atlantic Monthly has named him one of the 100 most influential Americans in history. And I thought I would put that in the record so that more people that then read the Atlantic Monthly would know about them. We welcome you once again to the Judiciary Committee, Ralph Nader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Congressman Gomer, and other members of the committee for this important and timely hearing. A lot of interesting, good points have just been made, and there's no point for redundancy. I'd like to mention that we ought to look at the issue of government secrecy and government openness with a historic cost-benefit evaluation. I worked with Congressman John Moss in 1966 on the first Freedom of Information Act, and I saw the fervent opposition of the bureaucrats in the executive branch to what was then a rather modest piece of legislation. I then worked with him on the strengthening 1974 Freedom of Information amendments, which made our Freedom of Information Act arguably the best in the world, and I also saw the same opposition. I think that people like Daniel Patrick Moynihan in his book on government secrecy point out that one of the first victims of government secrecy is the Congress itself. The Congress repeatedly has been repudiated from getting the information in order to perform its constitutional responsibilities, such as its war-making power, its oversight subpoena power, its appropriations, deliberations, and many others. Bruce Fein has decried this deprivation of information on the part of by the executive branch vis-a-vis Congress as a principal cause of weakening what is supposed to be the most powerful branch of our government. If you look at the historical record, the benefits of disclosure vastly outweigh the risks that come from disclosure. Wars could have been prevented if the American people knew what was going on in the Spanish-American War, in World War II, in the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, if the American people knew what was going on before the invasion of Iraq, with the lies, the cover-ups, the distortions that now have been historically documented by the Bush administration, including Richard Clark, the anti-terrorism counselor to President Bush, among many. What's fascinating about this Wikileaks controversy is that we have to avoid it becoming a vast distraction, focusing on these so-called leaks instead of focusing on the abysmal lack of security safeguards by the executive branch of the U.S. government, and making those who set up this porous system, who allowed it to be penetrated, accountable. The distraction also is away from the lack of accountability for executive branch officials who suppress information. How many times have you seen those people prosecuted at the highest levels and the middle levels of government? The suppression of information has led to far more loss of life, jeopardization of American security, and all the other consequences that are now being attributed to WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. 1 million Iraqis have died as a result of the invasion, 5,000 U.S. soldiers, 100,000 sick and injured and traumatized, a country blown apart, more violent opponents to our country, more national insecurity. We have to be very careful here that the Congress does not stampede itself by executive branch pressure to repeat the Patriot Act debacle, when this committee issued a pretty sound piece of legislation with hearings, bipartisan, and then was stampeded along with the rest of the Congress by Karl Rove and George W. Bush with this notorious Patriot Act. Stampeded legislation always comes back to haunt its authors. Furthermore, I'm very disturbed by the reaction of Attorney General Holder. I think he's reacting to political pressure, and he's starting to fix the law to meet the enforcement policy. And that's very dangerous. He said the other day, quote, the national security of the United States has been put at risk, the lives of people who work for the American people have been put at risk, the American people themselves have been put at risk by these actions that are, I believe, arrogant, misguided, and ultimately not helpful in any way, end quote, referring to the WikiLeaks disclosures via the New York Times and the Guardian and other newspapers. Those very words could apply to the Bush administration and the Obama administration's military and foreign policy, as they would put us in greater risk. And it's very important for us, especially represented by Congress, that the penchant for secrecy is not nourished further by the WikiLeaks events, which are going to unfold in greater magnitude in the coming weeks, to leave millions of citizens in our country with a debilitating dictatorial vulnerability to further concentration of authoritarian power in the executive branch. Floyd Abrams, not known as a radical, arguably the leading First Amendment practitioner in the country, said, quote, in responding to Senator Lieberman's precipitous urging for Holder to indict Assange, he said, quote, I'd say the potential risks outweigh the benefits of prosecution. I think the instinct to prosecute is rational, and I don't mean to criticize the government for giving it serious consideration. But at the end of the day, I think it could do more harm to the national security, properly understood, than letting it go. Jefferson and Madison had it right. Information is the currency of democracy. Freedom of speech is inviolable. And I would add that secrecy is the cancer, the destroyer of democracy. We have overwhelming examples, some of which were in your statement, Mr. Chairman, of what happens when information paid for by the taxpayer, reflective of the public's right to know, is kept secret. If you take all of the present and probable future disclosures under the Wikileaks initiative, the vast majority should never have been classified. The vast majority are reprehensible use of people employing taxpayer dollars. The vast majority should have been disclosed, if not never stated, for the benefit of the American people to hold their government accountable. Forbes magazine, in a cover story in its edition December 20th, outlines in an interview with Julian Assange that early next year, the beginning of the disclosure of corporate documents will start. Early next year, Forbes said, quote, a major American bank will suddenly find itself turned inside out. Tens of thousands of its internal documents will be exposed on Wikileaks.org with no polite request for executives' response or other form orders. Now, the importance of that is the danger of the following coalition appearing in the coming months. You have the government bureaucrats who transcend political parties, the government bureaucrats and the corporate executives who want to destroy the provision for whistleblower protection in the new Financial Reform Act, as we speak, that they band together in order to focus on the WikiLeaks and try to stampede Congress and perhaps public opinion into enacting legislation that will further stifle the right of the American people to know and further enhance those who believe that the few can decide for the many and that concentrated power in the executive branch can make a mockery out of the constitutional authority reposited in the U.S. Congress. We hear a lot about the information age. We hear a lot about what it's supposed to do for us. But the risk in this WikiLeaks overreaction to control of the internet and to damaging a dissemination of compilation and access to information worldwide is very, very serious. That is only one of the consequences that can occur if the Congress allows itself to overreact and if the press does not take a measured view and hold to account those who are calling for executive assassinations, for repressions, for the detonation of due process against people who have received information from internal government sources. I think the proper range of government security is now being deliberated in the executive branch, but it needs to be stimulated by Congress. At DARPA, Peter Zatko and his group is busily working on a technical fix so that this kind of disclosure never happen again. Many people think that that cannot be done, that the genie of the internet is out of the bottle. But it does seem to me that we should be very careful in conclusion in not developing a bill of attainder mindset, if I may use that metaphor. If it's okay for Obama administration officials to conspire or collude with Bob Woodward, to use a non-normative intonation of those words, and leak cables and all kinds of secret information, and do it with impunity, with a reporter who then puts it in a book.
At some point, he needs to stop.
It does seem that we are on our way not for developing equal protection policy, but for the kind of discriminating policy that will make our legal system not reliable and subject to the distortions of repeated judicial decisions.
Mr. Chairman,
I'll leave you with that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Okay, no point.